All right, this is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage.
I'm Nancy Richards, and welcome. Welcome to the week
Week
in Trump
two, week two of Trump 2.0.
2.0.
Um, and so there was a lot that happened. The inauguration, even though it was last week, feels like 500 years ago. What do you think?
Uh, it's big. It's a big blur. It doesn't feel 500 years ago. It just feels like it's been one long week. Like
Yeah, and part
hasn't
of
stopped.
yeah, and the reason for that is there's a flurry of new executive orders on a ton of different issues, DEI, gender identity, immigration, outrageous pardons of criminals who assault police officers, um, and and not to mention yesterday, uh, a full federal government spending freeze, which put a panic into the entire nation and into the government because some critical
They
things are
rescinded on right now, so
they
they put it on.
rescinded it, and actually a court stepped in before that to issue an injunction, issue a stay on that 22 Democratic attorney generals from different states filed a lawsuit against that proposed action, along with some other not-for-profit groups and political action groups. And the judge sided with the petitioners, and so they issued a stay. And then earlier today, this is being recorded on Wednesday, the 29th. The executive order which froze federal spending was rescinded. And so that's where we are right now. But just total chaos, total disorder, total uh, anarchy, which is the point.
Yes. Well, I think what Trump likes to do is he likes to throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. It's very messy.
Yeah,
It's very messy. And that's how I kind of see he's doing all these crazy things, and a lot of it obviously he can't do, even though he is doing it. Like there's going to be pushback, like the courts are going to step in, but he doesn't care. He's going to do it, and it wreaks panic. Like for example, rescinding the funding on the federal level, and you had people panicking in regards to who's going to is Medicare going to go, is Meals on Wheels going to be delivered, the deportation of all these people, even though he's saying it's just criminals, but it's not just criminals. In regards to people with records, there are other people who are getting kind of caught up in the overlay of the deportation. Even though his press secretary did say that if you came here illegally, technically you're a criminal. So they don't view people. They he's viewing everyone as a criminal who so he's treating them like criminals. So that's causing people to panic.
yeah, well, and rightfully so. And just to update our listeners on what the spending freeze means. So, in the Constitution, we are both history teachers, and in the Constitution, uh, the founders gave the power of the purse, meaning the power to generate and spend money in the federal government, to Congress. And that is in Article 1 of the Constitution. And what Trump has done is a process called, or is attempted to do, is a process called impoundment. Impoundment is basically when a president unilaterally decides, I'm not going to spend the money that Congress has appropriated to a certain cause or to a certain agency or to a certain uh, issue or project that the federal government has agreed to fund through the congressional process. Trump was impeached over that in his first term in 2019. Ukraine was set to receive funds to defend themselves from a potential Russian invasion at the time. That has since come to pass. But Trump withheld that funding because he wanted Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, to dig up dirt on Joe and Hunter Biden. And he said, you will not get this funding unless that happens. unless you do us a favor. So essentially, what he has done, and he, of course, he released the funding when that scheme was uncovered and he was caught. Uh, but he's essentially taken that scheme, which led to his first impeachment, and has attempted to do that for the entire federal government. And so that is what that's all about. And the court issued an injunction to stop the executive order freezing federal spending, and they have since rescinded it. And I think this creates an opening for Democrats because Democrats focus, they didn't go into the weeds like I just did on the constitutional issues, but they did go into the human impact of this. Medicaid portal was down, Medicare was interrupted, all things that touch people's daily lives were impacted. And Democrats seem to focus on that yesterday in their messaging. I watched Senator Schumer's press conference with the Democratic leadership in the Senate, and they were all focused on restoring the funding and stopping the executive action. And state attorney generals are also taking action in court. What did you think of both the action and just the response?
Well, just to kind of exactly kind of what I said before, he does it anyway. So the fact that he got impeached over it the first time, so what?
Mhm,
Because, look at him, he's president again. I mean, he took there was a hiatus, with Biden, but he's back.
mhm,
And so I don't think he really cares about, being impeached because he's very good at using the courts himself. As you know, he's gotten out of all of his issues, his personal issues, because he ran for president. Um, I think the Democrats pointed out the obvious, which was good. The fact that this is going to impact Medicare and, you know, Meals on Wheels. This will impact directly, which caused him to pause. But like I said, this is what he does. He he kind of um, muscles through. He doesn't care about the implications at all. And you either call him on it or you don't. And sometimes you can prevent him, but it's exhausting and it causes stress on a lot of people. It causes stress on the elderly. It's going to cause stress on our immigrant population in regards to the deportation. Um, and so but he doesn't care about these he doesn't care about this population because he's president right now, so he's going to do what he wants to do. um as I said, Democrats should be pointing the obvious, but they should also be proposing legislation or new ideas to counter what he does that will be better, and they haven't done that.
Oh, well, I agree. Democrats are in the minority now in both chambers, and so anything that they propose is going to be in a trash heap now. But I do agree that there needs to be some policy proposal. So I think that this creates an open.
It does, but let me just say this: Republicans have been in the minority, and they have slowly, I mean, if you look at how, like, we're going to get to McConnell, but if you look at slowly how they built in regards to, like, building a conservative Supreme Court, like, regarding leadership, I think Democrats really need to come together and focus on some core ideas that everyone can get behind. They should build leadership that could deliver on all levels, state, local, and federal. um, and I'm hoping that's what they do.
Yeah, and well, and
It's
I
not going to happen tomorrow.
right.
The first thing
It,
they should be thinking about is the midterms. Who can they put
absolutely.
forward for the midterm? For example, on our own level, like, who's going to challenge Nicole Malliotakis? Are we thinking about that on now as opposed to just throwing in anybody that nobody knows and then doesn't is not going to get elected because she's Nicole? We can defeat Nicole.
Yes, and I think what the opening that this has created for the Democrats as far as the spending freeze is concerned is this is an action because for a long time people were saying, "Oh, you're overreacting. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that." And he did. And I think this is, I think Democrats real number one as the opposition need to say, number one, we told you so. He is doing all of this. But number two, here's what we propose. And I think a good place to start is unrigging parts of the system that people feel is rigged. And so, campaign finance, for example, I think
Great idea. Go
I,
after
yeah,
campaign financing.
campaign finance is a big thing. I know it's kind of wonky for most people, and most people, I think, don't get how that impacts their lives. But if you restore some of the McCain Feingold campaign finance laws that the Supreme Court struck down in Citizens United in 2010, that would restore some guardrails to dark money and to restore some guardrails to create a separation between these billionaires and these giant corporations and the people who are our elected officials, many of whom are up for auction, basically.
Well, I agree with you on that, but there's a big but with me. You, what you just said, absolutely, we need to do that, but we're not going to get voters, okay? You need to do that action behind the scenes, but then give an action like I was telling you earlier that people can actually feel like give a bone to the middle class, a real bone, give them a real tax break, something that they can hold on to and that is tangible and they understand. Like if you have a first time home buyer or even a home buyer who has, a rental income, give them a tax break. Something that so in the meantime, you can kind of you had said in the last couple of episodes how sometimes, and there was this talk about how people felt the Democrats were talking not down on people but above people. And I think something like the bill that you just talked about, nobody really knows that bill. You do, I do, because we're political. But an average person who's trying to make ends meet, they don't understand that right off the bat. So in addition to that, Democrats should also be tagging something else
Well,
that
I also think maybe I think increasing the federal minimum wage is long overdue. And I think we need to, talk about flooding the zone with shit. Thank God Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are gone because they are the ones who blocked that in the last Biden bill. And
yeah.
so I think increasing the federal minimum wage to at a rate that's competitive with where most states are at the moment I think is also a good way to start
Yes.
too.
But that helps the poor. That doesn't help the middle class. So people who own a home aren't necessarily worrying about the minimum wage. We tend to I find, and you could agree or disagree with me, I think as a nation, as a whole, we tend to do things for the poor and we do things for the rich. We never do anything for people in the middle. We always feel, oh, they're doing okay. But and those are the people that don't vote for have we lost. This is the group that Democrats lost. And we
Yeah.
need to do things. And I'm not saying do not do things for the poor. I'm saying I feel that's all we ever think about. And I don't say take away the minimum wage. You got to give something to the middle class that they can go, oh, okay, thank you.
Well, I just want to excuse our listeners. I'm coughing a lot. I'm nursing a cold, but
And I'm
um,
sneezing. So welcome to this.
winter in New York. Well, for me, I also think that, and we talked about this a little bit before we go on, I think we also ought to raise taxes on the rich a little bit and be sincere about it. And not just, and when I say raise taxes on the rich, not just individuals, not just billionaires, I think that only goes so far, but the corporate tax rate. The corporate tax rate under Eisenhower was about 60 or 70%, and a lot got done with that money. The highways were built, the GI Bill was passed. All of that, I think, could go a long
Wonderful.
way.
Wonderful. But you know what I never hear when I hear your argument? I never hear people show the Eisenhower days, how that actually did work. Because like when somebody says, not like when you say it, but when someone says we should raise the corporate tax rate, and then you've gotten the counter going, like, no, that's not a good idea. we need someone like Robert Reich to come in and say, no, some of the healthiest economic times was during Eisenhower when that rate we did have it at that time. And people need to be shown the 1950s. Look at the 1950s, you know. Um,
I think teachers should be in charge of democratic messaging.
did you hear that this is the newest this is brand new, but they're looking to take away money. Uh, they're going to take away funding from schools that teach uh,
DEI.
critical race theory. And I'm like, they don't even know what it is. How are they going to take money away from it? So,
Well, anything that mentions anything other than white people, basically.
yeah,
That's what they view critical race theory as. Um, but yeah, well, I think teachers should be the ones who are in charge of democratic messaging. We know how to wrap things up in ways that people understand, and oftentimes we're often speaking to unwilling audiences and get them to buy in. And so I think teachers should be in charge of it.
we should. But, if I listen to one more if I listen to one more thing on television about how we're not teaching our kids financial literacy, I want to throw something at the television. I'm like, has anyone been to my economics class? That's all we teach. We
Yeah.
like our curriculum in New York City is financial literacy, like how to write a checkbook, how to balance a book, how to pay rent, how does Wall Street work? We do that. And so when people say they're not teaching financial literacy, I'm going, where are they?
I also think we need to have what I would call a civics literacy revolution. And part of the civic literacy revolution is just kind of reteaching and also putting emphasis on the value of things like checks and balances, for example. And I think that uh, more people would know how to respond to somebody like Trump, who unilaterally decides, oh, I'm going to freeze federal spending and I'm going to impound funds and put them wherever I want. And I think, speaking of checks and balances, we had some cabinet nominations go through last week. Um,
Yes. But before you say that, I just want to add to what you just said because one of the circles that I'm in, there was this a government teacher, and they were concerned about how they were going to teach in this day and age. I said, "This is a wonderful age to teach." I go, "If you teach something like checks and balances and teach the kids the basics, I go, this is a great way for the teach the kids how to come up with their own conclusions. You can show them what checks and balances are, and then you can present them with things that are actually happening, and then they can come to their own conclusions
yeah,
on this. And this is a great way, and this is not, thrusting, liberal,
we're,
whatever they
we're not
crap they call
indoctrinating
it, but
anybody. Yeah, we're not.
this is what we are doing. This is how I teach,
Yeah,
I want kids to be, how hard it is to teach a kid to come up with his own conclusions. Usually like, well, what do you think, miss? Like,
yeah,
I'm like, teach a thing, not
yeah.
me.
Well,
But
speaking of checks and balances, I think we had some cabinet nominations and, we had some less controversial ones. Scott Bessent was confirmed as Treasury Secretary, Kristi Noem as Homeland Security, Hydra Dogs.
made her special guest appearance. I'm calling her the Housewives of Homeland Security. She came out in
Oh,
her little hat and long hair and makeup, and for her daily early morning raid, with her little vest.
fascist
Check.
Barbie,
Yeah.
fascist Barbie. Fascist Barbie. And so she was confirmed, she's controversial in her own ways, but compared to some of the others, not so much. And the most controversial one that was confirmed was Pete Hegseth, of Secretary of Defense. And what was interesting about that to me, now I expected Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski to vote no on that, but a third Republican senator joined them, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Now, and Mitch McConnell in the past has made a lot of noise about opposing Trump when during the second impeachment, he floated in the media that he might vote to convict him. But ultimately,
Really?
Yeah, and then he folds, but then he folds like the corner of a fitted sheet.
or
Uh,
freezes.
yeah, and or freezes. But he actually did vote against Pete Hegseth, and there's talk that he will vote against Tulsi Gabbard. There's talk that he will vote against RFK. Mitch McConnell is a polio survivor. RFK has talked about getting rid of the polio vaccine, or at least called it into question. And he also may vote against Kash Patel. That's what I'm hearing. Um, and JD Vance had to get out of his, big boy pajamas and come to the Senate and break the tie uh, for
Oh,
Pete Hegseth.
I want to talk about JD Vance for a moment. Okay. Not yet, but just want to write it down. Yes, well, he did vote. I mean, so what are you saying about Mitch McConnell? That he is
He is in
what
his.
he's supposed to? I don't know. Has a
Oh,
consciousness?
no, he doesn't have a conscience, but he's in his YOLO era, and he's in
And
his.
for the older folks, please explain what YOLO is.
You only live once. The chains of being the Senate Republican leader are off, and so He's got 2 more years left of his Senate term, and so I think he's going to use them to fuck up Donald Trump's shit in some
Well,
ways. I think especially on national security, on foreign policy, where he's far apart from the isolationist wing of the party. I think that's gonna be where the breach is.
well, I think he's come to Congress and done what he's needs has done. You know,
Mhm.
he's set up. He's got a conservative court. He made that happen, and he's built a solid Republican Party in in Congress. So I think he's set his goals, and so yeah, now he could take a step back. Maybe he doesn't have to vote the way he might have to vote in order to preserve things. So yeah, he's living kind of like how Trump is running his presidency. He doesn't have to care about getting reelected. You
Well,
know,
unless he establishes a dictatorship, and then we don't have an election. But
I just don't. I'm not in that camp as much as you because I think he's too old to, unless he passes this on to the kids. But otherwise,
yeah.
I
Well,
think this.
yeah, and well, it's interesting that you brought up his age, because people have said on like the Daily podcast of the New York Times, Rachel Maddow said it when she was on Pod Save America. People have been talking about Trump's age. They said that that's the wild card, that he is, almost 80 years old, not exactly mentally or physically fit. And that's the wild card in terms of what actually happens here. But Mitch McConnell, keep living your best Senate life. We're here for it. I'm here for it. Just don't freeze.
Yeah.
Just don't
Well,
freeze.
we will see. I hope in those appointment picks that the Democrats do not vote. There was I was listening to Dan Abrams, and they were discussing Democrats voting yes for some of the appointees, and I think especially Fetterman. I think, and I'm also I agree with Fetterman in some things. He lives. He's in a state where his constituents went for Trump, so he has to show the fact that he can work within the realms of government. So I don't think he can afford to be as antagonistic as somebody else if he wants to keep a seat because a favorite Democrat lost their
Bob
seat.
Casey. Bob
Yeah.
Casey. Yeah.
So I think he needs to show that he will work. But I also feel he's independent enough where he'd be like at times go no. So I think some of the Democrats might be voting, saying a few yeses just to show that, back to their constituents that um, I'm willing to work. Because I do believe there's a big part of this country that wants to get shit done, and they're kind of tired of it. I think Congress really needs to prove. I don't really care who wins, Republican or Democrat, in the essence of please pass bills that are beneficial for the country, as opposed to you know, waiting it out and not having a border bill because you want to get someone elected.
Well, yeah, and I think, like I said, I have mixed feelings about Fetterman, particularly because number one, I respect him for everything he's gone through as far as his stroke and his health, and uh, being open about mental health and depression. That's not easy, especially for men to do. I get it. But uh, I think Fetterman needs to, he's voting yes, like some of the others on the less controversial picks, which is fine, like John Ratcliffe for CIA director, Scott Bessent for Treasury, some of the others that are lesser known. But when he says things like, oh, uh, people are just being paranoid when they say Kash Patel is going to go after people, go after Trump's enemies. No, we're not. The guy wrote a book. He said what he was going to do. And he has a literal fucking list of people he wants to go after. So we're not being paranoid. We're not being paranoid, Senator. And so he said, oh, well, that's not going to happen. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And so to what degree, I don't know. But I think him as a United States Senator, political considerations or not, that has to be a line in the sand where you oppose government being used to persecute the political enemies of the
Say
president.
he was going to vote for him? Did he publicly say he was going to
No,
vote
he
for him?
didn't say he was going to vote
He
for him,
just
but
made that comment.
he made a comment of like,
I,
oh, well,
I would take, so I'm going to do a Fetterman right now. I'm going to pull a Fetterman. I I would kind of, all right, well, let's see how he votes. That's how I'm concerned. He made a
I
comment.
think I think
Let's see how
like
he votes.
I think voting for some of the other cabinet secretaries is fine because he's going to get them whether whether we like it or not, because the Republicans have control of the Senate. But I think that taking a stand on somebody like Kash Patel, who is a danger.
I don't think he can stand. I think he made a comment.
No, I think I
That is,
think I think that should be his responsibility is taking a stand to say we do not want
oh,
running federal
you're saying he
agencies.
should be
Yeah.
more publicly against him.
We shouldn't have people running federal agencies who will use it to suit their own political needs and revenge and using it as some sort of prosecution arm for political enemies, which Kash Patel has vowed to do over and over and over again. Kash Patel wrote a children's book talking about the 2020 election being rigged for children, for
Yeah, I
children.
know.
And so for John Fetterman to say, "Oh, we're just being paranoid," that's not going to happen. No, no. This is where you have to actually take a stand. And if you lose an election, you lose an election. But it's a stand that's absolutely a must happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I, you know who else wrote a book is Huckabee. Do you hear those ads? I want to buy. I'm not buying one.
An ad for
He's
what?
he's giving them out for free. Huckabee also he wrote a children's book about Donald Trump, and he said all of our children should know about the life of our great president Donald Trump. He goes so much that I'm giving it's like every 5 minutes on POTUS radio on Sirius. It's commercial, so like, he's giving them out. I'm like, oh, I want to get one for free and see what's in this book. So
Oh, freshly, they accused us. You brought up indoctrination before. That's fucking indoctrination. That is indoctrination, not teaching about actual things that happen related to marginalized groups. That's fucking indoctrination.
that's
That is their version of the Little Red Book.
yes,
That
the
is their version of the Little Red Book.
little red book. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, but we will. When is Cash Patel's appointment coming up?
I don't know. I don't know when the hearing. I think if I'm guessing right, I think it's probably next week because Tulsi's is tomorrow.
The
Our
vote or the hearings? Because
hearing.
Kennedy's for
Yeah,
today.
Kennedy's
You
hearing.
listen. Why don't you talk about what did you think of those hearings?
Well, for one, I watched a little bit of it, and it might sound a little petty, but I can't listen to him talk for too long. It's just painful. Um,
Yeah.
and because he's got some kind of issue where it's just, the sentence just doesn't come out right away, and it's a thing. But what was really concerning to me is that every response, no matter who it was from a Republican, whether it was a Republican senator or a Democratic senator asking him the question, He said, "Oh, well, President Trump has directed me to do this. President Trump has directed me to do that." And Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada actually said to him, "So are you just a rubber stamp? Are you just somebody who is just going to, no matter what happens, and you're going to do whatever they say?" And she actually brought up a really good point. Oh, no, it was Senator Hassan from New Hampshire. She said to him, "At what point did you sell out the values that you claimed to hold just for a job?" Because she brought up stances that he took in the past about abortion, about this, about that, and that, and of course, he dodged every single question. And so, which wasn't surprising to me, but I don't love the Kennedys, all of them. I just think there's an air of entitlement about them. And uh, but I did respect Caroline Kennedy, daughter of JFK, cousin of RFK Jr., coming out yesterday and speaking rather compellingly about why the Senate should not confirm her cousin. And
Well,
so I think uh, we should listen to that because she brings up really disturbing personal things, but also some things that have had consequences, or have been consequential on other people, like talking leaders in American Samoa out of vaccinating children for measles, and then an outbreak happens. And so I think that was really compelling. What did you think? Did you see a little bit of it?
yeah, I did, and my response is so what? And you know why I'm saying so what? Because we had a lot of compelling discussions about Hesketh, what's his name? Pete
Exactly.
Hesketh. It was horrible in regards to like some of the things that he did, his alcoholism. He's going to run the Department of Defense, and some of the things that it didn't matter. No, he was confirmed. He's going. So look who's running the country. Like grab him by the pussy. We elected a man who his value system is so. As much as like it was interesting to hear her argument why you shouldn't vote or support his nomination, part of me is like, who gives a crap? Because they're going to vote for him anyway, because Trump said so. And that's this day and age. And so we're just going through the motions where we have the appointments and it's kind of like, we're going through the motions. So that's how I feel. I'm kind of like this is Donald Trump. He's our president, and he's going to put up these messed up people in the cabinet, and people are going to approve it, and they're going to kind of flip the coffee table.
Yeah.
They're going to flip the coffee table, and
Well, I think if we want to
there we
target,
go.
I think if Democratic senators, if Chuck Schumer or anybody in the Democratic leadership wants to target potential Republican senators to cross over, I think Collins and Murkowski are one. McConnell, I think, especially again because of RFK's stance on the polio vaccine, and would be open to that. But there are others too who I think could be convinced. One is somebody who I've forgotten about. It was John Curtis. He's the Republican senator from Utah. He's Mitt Romney's replacement in the Senate. And he has kind of a streak of independence as well. He was very much against any local GOP action to censure Mitt Romney for his votes on impeachment of Trump. And I think somebody like that could be won over. And all they need is four. All they need is four senators to cross over and vote no.
Well, let's hope. I mean, let's hope. Let's hope there'll be some people. But um, in regards to the fact that Pete Heskett was approved. I mean, we didn't get God, the creepy. Oh my God,
Matt
where's my
Gaetz. Matt Gaetz.
yes,
Well, Matt Gaetz was was supposed to be Attorney General.
right.
Yeah, and he was actually on Bill Maher. I sent you that. That was kind of a crazy interview.
Wait, when was he on Bill Maher? Not recently.
Yes, he was on Bill Maher's podcast, not the show.
Oh, okay.
He
Because
was
I
on,
watched the last two shows and I was like, he wasn't on
oh,
it.
he was on the podcast, and
Oh, okay.
that was an interesting conversation.
Well, that's where he smokes weed and then kind of sits back in the chair. It's a very different
Yeah,
show than
it
real
is.
time.
It is. It is. But even still, he was very much he was going at him, and I thought at first I was like, well, why are you having this fucking guy on? I was like, he's such a creep and ick. But then I watched it,
Listen,
and it was good, and he did what he should have done, and he pressed him on issues related to the ethics report.
that's why I
And
like watching him because he
yeah,
puts people on. He puts people on that Democrats may say, "Oh, you can't put him on because of who he is," and he's like, "No." Um, and I don't agree with a little crux of Bill Maher and things that he says, but I watch his show every week, and I respect the fact that he puts both sides of the table on, and he's a Democrat.
yeah.
Bill Maher is a Democrat, but he will criticize his party, and sometimes, people don't like that, and I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it too, but his way of doing it is very grouchy. It's sort of very get off my lawn type of thing. And I think,
He's got a thing with Gen Zers, which I don't quite, I find it a little exhausting.
yeah,
Like, I think sometimes I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, here we go.
yeah,
Like, yeah, get off my lawn,
yeah,
young boy. But whatever, that's his gripe. That's his gripe, whatever. That's not going to stop me from not listening to him.
yeah,
And
yeah. And I think that was check it out definitely to our listeners too.
so
Definitely check that out. Um,
I was working on something personal earlier, and somebody was like, "Well, have you had time to go through this online course?" I'm like, "No, just listen to podcasts. I don't have time to do anything else. Like that's all I'm, you know, like
yeah,
I listen to Dan Abrams in the car coming home, so I get that like the driving I can like double dip, while I'm driving I can listen to something.
yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. And we have so uh in the so we talked about before Steve Bannon talking about flooding the zone with shit. That was his saying, not mine. It's we kind of
including himself.
yeah, well, we kind of think of ourselves as the plumbers. We want to help you navigate through the shit as much as possible because it's hard to keep up with. So we have all these flurry of executive actions, but also some other anti-democratic, and I don't mean anti-democratic party, I mean anti-democracy actions that have been taken over the past week is when Trump fired the inspector generals of each federal
Yeah.
department.
Oh, yes. And thanks
Yeah.
for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Um, Now, there's an argument that has been going on about, and this is where I disagree. I always like agree with Dan. I love Dan Abrams, but here I was like, nah, I don't agree with you on this. But the fact that they just fired people in regards to not giving them any notice as well either. But Abrams was like, I don't really care about how they got fired. He goes, I care. He goes, I care about who he's going to put in replace of it. But I care about both. I I think, there are people who spend their lives working in the federal government. In regards to, I understand the whole spoil systems. Like there's certain people that are going to help you pull forth your agenda. But there's basically nuts and bolts people who are doing the daily ins and outs of the federal government. They don't deserve to get fired.
No, and well, he wants these particular inspector generals fired because they're going to be honest and be transparent about him stealing money from those agencies to uh, give to his billionaire oligarch friends. And I think that just to give our listeners some context, these inspector general laws were put into place after Watergate in the 1970s, and it was designed for more transparency and to curb corruption in federal agencies. And the law said the reason why this is illegal is because the law says that he must give Congress 30 days before. firing these people. He has the right to fire them, but he did not go through the process. Again, separation of powers, checks and balances. He did not let Congress know within 30 days. And there was actually a letter written, co-signed actually by a Republican senator, which pointed that out. It was Chuck Grassley from Iowa was the Senate chairman who wrote that letter jointly with another Democratic senator who I'm not thinking of right now.
How
But
many, how much energy or how much can the other branches of government like put like roadblocks in front of him and go, wait, no, you can't do that. No, wait, you can't do that. There's going to be a couple of times where like, oh, fuck it. I don't
yeah,
have enough arms, like how many
yeah.
people,
Absolutely. Well, I think this is not something like what you were talking about earlier about what voters understand and can connect to their daily lives. This is not something that most voters understand and can connect to their daily lives, but you and I can appreciate it because of the historical significance of it and because of where this all originates from and what the purpose for having inspector generals are. But the where Democrats, I think, need to seize the opening is in this federal spending freeze. And so far they have been. And they've been beating that to death because it does expose Trump's priorities as far as cutting social services, even though he's maintained that he doesn't want to do that, uh, and getting rid of things that uh, people need in their daily lives. And they're also pointing to the fact that this uh, spending freeze was part of a plan laid out in Project 2025 with Trump, which Trump said he had no idea about and has nothing to do with. And
well, it's
so
kind of
I
like where
think
they're
that's
looking at the cutting of funding in schools in regards to what you're teaching and what you're not teaching. Uh, Now, I understand that the federal government gives money to schools, like, for example, the Bush No Child Left Behind. Like
Mhm.
there was a caveat to that. If you're going to get this money, you have to do certain things that are outlined in this plan. Um, you know, is that what, the president's allowed to do that with the Department of Education. So, but the fact of the matter is that I've never heard anybody who's criticized critical race theory been able to define what it is. So if they're going to talk about funding and what's being taught in schools, but they can't actually describe it themselves, that's just bias.
Well,
And
it's just it's basically anything, that mentions gay people or mentions black people or women or any contribution. They claim to want to promote a system of meritocracy. When has Donald Trump ever done anything based on merit? Donald
no,
Trump, Donald Trump, he says he's been treated unfairly, and I agree. He has been given more money than most people can ever imagine. He has been supported and held up by more people and institutions and banks and networks than anybody ever can expect in their entire lives. He gets to fail 4 or 5 times and come back. Most of us do not. What Michelle Obama said at the DNC is true. Not all of us can rely on the affirmative action of generational wealth. And so I think so for him and his cronies to say anything about meritocracy is bullshit. I think because none of these people have ever done anything on merit. Donald Trump was a terrible businessman. He's been bankrupt 6 or 7 times. Uh, most things that he has done has either lost money or have closed down, or millions of people died, like in the pandemic that he terribly mismanaged.
that is so true. But the fact of the matter remains is that this country elected that man for president. So moving forward, we need to put forth leadership and ideas that are going to excite the United States people and move away from the fact that it, are we a country that values things that Donald Trump values? Are we a racist? It's all about me country. Is that who we are?
Oligarchical.
Yeah, I mean, so if we are, ugh, that's disgusting. But, um, when people say, close the borders, they're being the Republicans brought forth a message that indicated that things were out of control. And there were issues, there were problems, but to the level that Republicans' messaging came out. So we need to put forth ideas and messages and people in leadership roles. And getting rid of people that are not detrimental or not helpful to the Democrats. Eric Adams.
Oh, well, yeah, we do. Well, that's somebody we've been saying we need to get rid of for months. And
So,
so,
well, you've been saying that, but now I'm starting to get on that
yeah. Well,
that
he, well, we've
a
been
little
saying,
bit.
I've been saying that, it's very likely ever since Donald Trump won the election, even before the election, Eric Adams kind of demurred, was hesitant to criticize Trump. In the last week, has said that he will not publicly criticize Trump, and it's pretty
Well, he lost.
obvious.
Yeah, he lost when he went down to the inauguration and on Martin Luther King Day, as opposed to staying here. Then I was just like, you didn't really need to do that. You,
Well, in his mind, he does. It's his only chance at freedom, and I thought maybe
well,
I thought that would come in
federal
the.
government is considering rescinding the charges.
Well, he can't.
It's working. It's working.
Yeah.
So what you and I think about this is, as voters, how is this going to impact Eric Adams as mayor? If the charges are dropped, okay, does he get to continue to be mayor? Are we going to elect him again?
Well, he has a chance to survive if he's pardoned or if the Justice Department drops the charges altogether. Well, first of all, I thought it would just be an outright pardon, but he's not white, so he doesn't get the same pardon as criminal rioters who assault police officers that are white. And
Oh,
so,
we
uh,
talked about that last week because that's just uh,
yeah.
that's the thing that's made me so sick. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Eric Adams is not a white man, so he doesn't get the benefit of criminal white people who assault police officers getting a pardon. So he gets the next best thing, which is a Justice Department that will ultimately drop the charges, even though there's no cause to. The evidence against Eric Adams is abundant and clear, and he would probably get convicted in a trial. And so that is going to, and so if this goes away, he does have a chance of political survival.
He does, because it's all on how people view what he did as serious. So, for example, when we look at what Donald Trump was charged with in New York City in regards to the felonies that he was charged and convicted of, a lot of people would say, and I agree, that we wouldn't have gone after him, those charges, if it wasn't Donald Trump. He still did them. And
Yeah.
so when the kids argue, like, "Oh, those are trumped up," I was like, no, he still, even though we decided to enforce those charges, he still did them. Like I always tell the kids, if you go through a red light and the police officer doesn't pull you over, you still ran through a red light and you still did break the law. You just weren't enforced. It just wasn't enforced. Same thing with Eric Adams. People may view like at Eric Adams, like I did, and Donald Trump sees it too. He goes, "Oh, they treated him unfairly." No, he did something wrong. And some people might be like, "Oh, he got an upgrade on an airplane." Does he need to go to jail for that? I don't know. But they're going to drop the charges. Or was
That's
it more serious? Did he overlook a building? Like he told
so.
like building supervisor or whatever, like, give them a pass because, they give me good air, they give
Armand,
me good status.
and I said this when he was first indicted, Eric Adams. He's always known as somebody who's on the take. He's always known as somebody who uh, is very much a play-to-play guy. And I think we need to get rid of that rot in the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And I think we need to.
There's a lot of grease the wheel.
And just the fact that we're thinking about replacing one criminal with another in Andrew Cuomo. is enough. And I think we
Well,
have to.
you say that. I don't think so. I do not. And I know people like, oh, polls say if we keep saying it, I'm a great believer of if you keep putting it out there, it becomes true. There's so many better people that we should be talking about. Fuck Cuomo. Really. Let's stop talking about him. Let's put like who do you like? Who do
Well,
you like? Who do you want to be mayor?
who I would want to be mayor, and it's kind of a tangential thing. I don't think it's going to happen, but it
No,
was
no, 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 no. It is. Who do you want to
there's
be
some.
mayor?
Well, it's
I
not a.
wanted Bill de Blasio to be mayor at first, okay?
Yeah, well,
And it,
well, this person's not in the race, but they were talked about initially. But I want my former boss, former city council speaker Christine Quinn, to be mayor.
you should keep saying that. You should keep
Yeah,
talking her up because she would make a great mayor. And I think she should come back. That's not
yeah.
a far-fetched idea. How
No, no,
I
it's
think
not.
it's a great idea. I
And
think
she
she'd make a great mayor.
and she still got millions in the campaign count from the 2013 race. So come on in, Chris.
Millions in the campaign count. What do you mean? Money?
Yeah, because in the city
That's
matching
the thing I don't get with you. I
what?
don't get the whole thing about money. When we
Uh,
talk about money, financing. And then on the other hand, you always talk about how people can raise money. So
well, no,
let's
she
put
got
that off the table and
she had
let's
this is money she raised from the last race in 2013. And so the way that the city finance system works is matching funds. Eric Adams, by the way, did not qualify because of his issues legally for matching funds, but she was able to get matching. She raised the maximum amount, I think at the time was 3
yeah,
million.
everybody has that. I know I've been you write a check and you match the fund. I get
Yeah.
that.
And
But
6
why does
million.
it have to be I hear it from you, I hear it a lot from local Dems. It's the people that we're putting forward are not people with good ideas. They're people who can raise money. And I don't like that.
Well, she's somebody who does have great ideas and can raise money. She is,
Okay, then that's a good thing. She's got two good things, but it shouldn't be like, oh, this person can raise money. Who are they? Oh, I don't know, but they can raise money.
and she's also, listen,
That means they can spend money and not get elected.
I think one thing it's and her time in government was a long time ago, so if she would enter, she would have to spend some time, I guess, reintroducing herself. But since she
She's
left
on a couple of
government,
talk shows. Invite her on here. We'll have
yes, I
her
would
on.
love that. Yeah, I
Yes.
would love
Oh,
that. And
let us be the ones who promote her. I
yeah,
mean,
I
why
would love
not?
that.
Why not? I am all for putting forth good people. I'm shaking my laptop. I'm sorry, that's why. But I'm all about that. That is my new mantra for Democrats. Let's put forth good leaders and not just bullshit. Let's develop. Let's build people. Who do you like? Who do we need to like? Who do we like as the future? And because we need to build a stronger Democratic Party. We can't do business as usual anymore. We need to get people back in believing that we are pro-union.
Yes.
Uh, we need to show that we are the party for the middle class by doing stuff for the middle class as opposed to just saying it. You know. So yeah, let's get Chris. I'll be with you on that one.
Yeah.
I'm
I
with
would.
her. I
Yeah.
know when she was first being put forth, I had a different candidate, but I'll support her now. So
Yeah, well, you know what? She's done a lot of good since leaving government. She works for an
yeah,
organization called Women in Need, and she's very well acquainted, I think, with the migrant crisis because her organization has dealt with it a lot. And so I think she would be a
she
fantastic.
worked for the Coalition of the Homeless.
I'm sorry?
She worked for the Coalition for the Homeless.
No, she works for a group called Women in Need. It's not for profit. And they are, at least in some of the outer boroughs, they've been dealing with the migrant issue
I
as a
thought she
way to
worked
deal
with
with.
like some housing issue agencies.
Yeah, Women in Need deals with a lot of that stuff. It's under their umbrella too. But
No,
sh
it was something else. I thought she was like an agency, like she was in charge of. So.
Yeah, so I'm hoping she makes a comeback either by running for mayor or perhaps running for Manhattan Borough President since that's a seat that's being
Quinn,
vacated.
if you're listening to us,
Yeah,
you
please
throw your
listen.
hat in, throw
Yeah,
your hat in.
please listen. I'll text my former boss from that office and I'll send her this podcast and she could get it to her. And so that, I think I, I'm hoping that a lot of the mayoral candidates will come on our podcast. I have reached out to some of them. I've reached out to the Lander campaign, city controller. He's running. I reached out to the Cuomo campaign, although I'm not hopeful about that.
No, 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 no,
Well,
no.
we
Why?
challenge him. We should challenge him. I think we should hold him to account. We're both
Not
teachers.
gonna come on.
We lived through his reign. We, as governor, Danielson is a thing because of him. And so Danielson's a thing because of him. Tier 6 is a thing because of him. So I think we should hold him accountable for all of those things. And the bail reform law is a thing because of him that people don't like and that he's been sanctimonious about crime about. I think we need to hold people accountable for their shit. And so I think I would love to have him on to confront him about all of those
I
things.
introduced him explaining how he's gotten like the most popular, survey says, you know, I don't want to have him on if we're going to elevate his platform. If we're going to challenge him, great, but not to elevate his platform. So, well, because, Eric Adams, I don't know if he can survive all of this. I don't, he said he was sick for a few days. He was hiding out. I don't know what that was all about. It was kind of secretive. Like, look, you're sick, you got a cold, tell the public, like I got COVID, I got to stay in for a few days. You like hide and you're not talking about what's wrong with you. Like you got a medical
So
condition.
that's how Biden dropped out. He got COVID and then dropped out. And so people they're literally calling in sick to drop out.
Way to go about it. I don't know. It's just kind of cowardly, but he's, he it looks like he's gonna get the charges dropped. So, it
We'll see.
and
I'm not
sold,
as I'm
he
not as
sold out, New York City migrants in
yeah.
order to get them.
I'm
So
not sure. Well, I'm not sure if it'll be dropped or if it's just talk. Because part of me thinks Trump is just fucking with him, like he's laughing at him from the White House. Oh, look, this guy is, dancing in front of me. He's not going to criticize me. I think he's just. A part of me thinks it's maybe just Trump, seeing, and this is what authoritarians do. They see how much they can humiliate people and into submission. And I think that may be part of what's happening here. How far
why
can
would you want to humiliate
because he's
humiliate
cruel. Because he's cruel. He's cruel. And the same reason he's putting these jokers up in front of the Senate to be confirmed, like Tulsi and RFK and Kash Patel and Hegseth, to humiliate these people, to make them do things that they would never do under ordinary circumstances. That is the power that the authoritarians want. They want to beat who they see as their opposition into submission, and not just Democrats. He
Eric
wants
Adams is his opposition? I don't.
and he also wants people who are indebted to him. He wants people who are indebted to him, and so either dropping the charges or an outright pardon, or even just the
Yeah,
discussion.
he got him to be softer on the migrants and how they came in. I was, one of the things I was thinking about as the ICE were sweeping in, I was like, oh, it's interesting. They're only sweeping in on like Democratic cities, but they went into Tallahassee last week, so I was like, okay, they went into Florida, but
Uh,
yeah, it's just curious, like where they're going in to like do these raids. They're only really doing them in Democratic cities.
well, the good thing,
Mind you, you'll find a lot of immigrants in democratic cities, but what about, in the rural where, a lot of farm workers and things like that? You don't
I
see it
think,
there.
I think a silver lining that has come out of the information to be relayed on social media is there's a lot of posts from different groups uh, talking about what to do if you have an encounter with an ICE agent. And I think that has proven to put a damper in the machine a little bit because Tom Homan, who is the person in charge of this operation to deport people using ICE, he said that that's made the deportations more complicated for them. The fact that people know what to do and they know their rights and they know who to call and they know how to proceed and that they're not just being swept up. They're not just going along with it. And so I think we need more of that too. We need more of that information just to tell people what their rights are and what to do.
Well, just information about in on Staten Island. One of the groups that I saw at the press conference, because they're giving out more money in New York City to these organizations around New York City to help migrants, um, you know, obtain legal information and what their rights are and not. And La Colmena, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but La Colmena, Colmena, is a Staten Island community-based organization that's working with the immigrant population here on Staten Island, and they're located at 774 Port Richmond Avenue. So um, there are organizations throughout New York City, but on Staten Island in our Forgotten Borough, that's one of the organizations, Project Hospitality, Centro, in Port Richmond. These are, but they were at the press conference. I saw them there, and they're also on Instagram. That's where I was getting their other
And
information.
and they also, I think these groups, many of them offer legal counsel to people who are in a situation where immigration law is needed.
Yes. So, these organizations can point them in the right direction. So, but they'll be getting more funding so they can hire, they like at the press conference, the spokesperson for this organization was saying, this money is going to go towards hiring lawyers so they can do these workshops and that they can process, um, you know, more of the needs of people who are being, picked up or running running workshops so people know their rights and what ICE can and cannot do. There was just a breaking news. It says that Trump will hold migrants at Guantanamo Bay. He's going to hold like 30,000 of them, which is another thing
Well, building concentration camps, basically. Let's call them what they are. And
yeah.
I think I hope that this is also something else that will be challenged in the courts, and that will ultimately be halted for as long as possible. Um, and that people don't make it easy on him to do this.
You know, they're taking these arrests and they're putting like Christine Hume, like she has her little like Homeland Security vest on in the night raid, and we're going after the criminals, and they're putting this up all social media, and
Dr.
they're making
fucking
it
Phil,
this like
too. Dr.
what?
Phil, Dr.
Yeah,
Phil went along on an ice raid that
yeah.
hick.
And not like the guy's like, I know you as he's getting arrested. But it's not funny because they're putting this stuff on TV. They're making this, and Donald Trump is a media person. He's this is The Apprentice. But in the meantime, they're making this out to be a spectacle of and they're getting this kind of support. But in the meantime, you know, when the bishop had said in her sermon in regards to the majority of the people that are coming here are hardworking people, and they're they're not
They're not
they're
criminals.
not gun running and they're not criminals, and the fact that the press secretary for the president said publicly, she goes, well, if they came here illegally, they broke the law, so they are criminals. So if that's how the executive branch is viewing the migrant population coming over, then they're not going to treat people who fall through the cracks any different than that Venezuelan kid that got arrested today who was, gun running.
Hmm.
They view them as the same, and that's wrong because you and I know there's a lot of good people who are just simply looking to better their lives and who add to our society so much. And they also pay taxes. And he's going to be quite surprised at the economic impact it's going to have on this country when they're not here,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
and and that's not to say that, we should keep them here so we can continue to exploit them and not give them the wages that everybody else gets. I think they should get the wages that everybody else gets, and a more secure place in our country. But I think that, I agree that this has become too much of a spectacle. Dr. Phil, who is all of a sudden a big critic of DEI when a black woman, Oprah Winfrey, gave him his opportunity. Uh,
Right.
and so let's,
Who
w-
didn't get a job because, like she worked her way up from the ranks, which most people do. I wish every like white person would read Michelle Obama's book to totally understand, as a woman of color, what she's encountered her entire life in trying to be successful, before she was first lady. Not
yeah.
after she was first lady, but before she was first lady. And it really, as someone who's white, who's never had to go through any of this, it really opened my eyes to a lot of things like that with affirmative action. And I've heard all of the prejudice. Well, you know, I took the fire test and they get 5 points extra. Like that is so not the story of affirmative action. It's not the story at all. And all Trump is doing right now is just kicking us back notches that we've worked so long,
Well, somebody said, interestingly enough, they said if they want the 50s, and if they want the 50s, they have to repeal the 60s. And so that's what he's doing.
and if they want the 50s, then they have to bring back the corporate tax rate.
Yes, 70% corporate tax rate. Uh,
So
yeah. And well, speaking of fees, I think congestion pricing is still happening here in New York City, and there's still as much opposition to it as ever here in Staten Island in the Forgotten Borough. And you had some interesting information about how it's going.
well, according to the statistics, it's showing that it is reducing congestion in regards to traveling into New York City, so that there are less, cars, and that more people are taking public transportation. And so, in that aspect, it is working.
Yeah.
Um, People are being forced, they can't pay that money, so they're being forced to take. Um, I don't think my problem with congestion pricing is I don't think they thought of boroughs like Staten Island when they implemented this. I would have liked to have seen more constructive ideas about how they were going to help us with public transportation. One of the things is I would have like, why aren't we the borough with the ferries? We're
Mhm.
an island. Why is it that, Williamsburg has like, or Greenpoint, you could take 5 or 6 boats to go a town over when you have like several trains. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Where aren't the ferries here? And please don't tell me there's not any docks. I mean, there's tons. Like, why
Yeah.
isn't there one from like the Port Richmond area where a lot, if you live in Manus Harbor or Port Richmond, how long that bus ride is to get to the ferry?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had if you had a ferry that came out of, I know there's one because they used to take a ferry to go up to Yankee Stadium. There used to be a promotion. So if they would have said, look, if we do this $9 thing, we're going to give Staten Island like three more ferries and X amount of like, because we're the borough who has to drive.
Yeah. And I think I drove into Manhattan a few weeks ago. I had something going on, and it was surprising. I went directly from work. I work in Brooklyn, and I drove across the bridge into Manhattan, and it
Eight,
was
$9.
yeah, but it was pleasant. It was a pleasant ride. The traffic was very smooth. And it took about 20 minutes to get to where I was going. I found parking fairly easily, which is crazy in Manhattan. And then a couple of days ago, I went to a conference on the Upper West Side, and I took the subway. I took the subway, and it was not packed, but it had a good crowd of people. And actually, and I know a lot of the bad stuff about what happens in the subway makes it into the media, and we should all be vigilant and aware of all that. but it was actually quite pleasant, also fairly quick, uh, cleaner than I remember, which is odd. And so we'll see.
Congestion price
Well, no, I mean the subway.
on a good train.
Yeah. Well, I got on a good train, but no, it was, but I think it's connected to congestion pricing because there was a good crowd, so more people are taking the subway. And so it's too early to say that it's working or that it's a success, and I'm still not for adding yet another fee to get out of Staten Island and to go into
Yeah.
Manhattan.
They
But
don't they don't
it,
offer
it's
they don't
doing what it's
offer
supposed
us
to.
anything new on Staten Island.
No,
And
I think
and
charge to get in, have an alternative. Maybe,
parts of Queens that are, the Rockaways, Jesus Christ, living on the Rockaways, how
yeah.
long it takes. And now they're closing that bridge because they have to fix it for because of Sandy, I think it was. There was some damage. So yeah,
A
yeah, they need
storm that
to be
happened
better.
13 years ago, people.
That's another problem, you
Yeah.
know. So we need to work faster um, in this city. That's definitely a must. But
Yes.
I'd like to see that. I would like to see some better transportation here on Staten Island. And then also on a local level, you had attended, you were a guest speaker this week
I
uh,
was. And we talked
at
to Democratic Organization.
Democratic Party's functions.
Yeah, Democratic Organization of Richmond County. It's not the Democratic Party County Committee. That's a separate thing. This is the Democratic Organization of Richmond County, one of the several Democratic groups here on Staten Island. And I was asked to speak very last minute at a local spot, and they wanted to know about the podcast. And once I got up to speak, it was interesting because I asked who's listened, and a good portion of the room raised their hand and listened.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, and so people knew us. But what I found really encouraging, especially now, especially in this dystopian reality we're all going through, is that there were several people, at least five or six. This was a room of maybe 30 people, and at least five or six of those people were new members and were attending a meeting for the first time. And they have a situation or a procedure in their club meetings where they introduce the new members stand up and they talk about why they're there. And they all said that they just felt like they had to do something. Like what Michelle Obama said at the convention, we have to do something. And so because they just couldn't sit back and watch anymore, that they had to do something. And that's encouraging because for a long time since the election up until now, there's been a kind of paralysis on our side. We just kind of don't know what to do. He won, even despite the fact that he's a miserable criminal human being. And so we just don't know how to proceed. But I think the fact that people are still willing to show up and willing to get into the fight is encouraging.
Right, and people have to be active, and active is on is a whole range of different ways that you can be active. Like I feel like you and I doing this podcast every week is a way to be active um, in regards to talking, messaging.
Yeah.
Some people, going to a meeting. Some people working in, I was listening to Jazzy, like she's cleaning up, the community fridge,
Yeah.
in regards to just taking like being local or your friend Jess running for being state senator, so putting forth good new leadership. And I think as
And
long as the
locally,
Democrats are doing stuff like this, I feel good.
yeah.
I feel good because we can listen to him every week and just sulk and sink into our couches, and I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, and local elections are just as important as the national and the presidential. This
Yep.
year, New York City, if you're a New York City resident, we have elections for mayor, we have elections for the public advocate, we have elections for the controller. City council members across the city are also up for re-election.
We
Some
will
are,
have them on. We're going to have a few on.
We will.
Is
So some of them, some of those people, I'm not necessarily here, but in other places, they are termed out because there is a two-term limit. But uh, in our on Staten Island, there's a an active primary happening for the 49th Council District seat, and our goal is to have all the candidates from the incumbent, Camilla Hanks, to some of the challengers, come on and just make their pitch to voters and
yeah.
to see and just to see what that process is all about. I'm in talks with a couple more citywide candidates to come on potentially. And so we'll see where that goes. I'm actually looking forward to a more local conversation, although I'm sure some awful shit will happen in the country
Well,
that we'll
like,
have to talk about.
there are some local people that, that we wanted to have on this week, but scheduling. So also too, if you're listening to the podcast and you would like to be a guest on our show, please contact us at
Yes.
Left Forgotten Borough. And we would definitely love to you know, have you on. And
And actually, we're adding a platform this week. So normally you could find us and listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Substack. But today we are uploading our first video to YouTube.
yes, so yeah, so this I definitely didn't change for as a dating app. So
Well, the funny thing was last week I wanted to do YouTube, but then I looked at mine and it was at a weird time of day. It was getting dark. I was kind of disappearing into the screen. And so, so this week I thought would be better. And I'm also a little fidgety on camera, I noticed. So this week I tried to stay still. I tried to stay still. So this way it's not
I
so,
wasn't talking with that into consideration, so I have no idea.
no,
So
I noticed that I'm very fidgety when I watch and look
not a
back.
vanity. This is, this is more about what we're saying and not what we look like. Because
Oh,
if
I
that was
know.
the case,
I would, oh, I know. Well, for me, it was a little distracting because I was like, oh my God, I'm all over the place. I need to, I need to,
right.
yeah,
It's all right. So we're on YouTube now.
we are.
Woohoo!
And I forgot, and so we'll promote it on all platforms. We encourage everybody to listen. And this has been the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage.
And I'm Nancy Richards, and we will see you next week. Thanks for that was a good show. So.
Thanks for listening.